Well, thanks very much. First of all, it's a pleasure being here, and I would like to thank the CEPR and wish the research network on the economics of aging and longevity a very long and healthy existence and productive existence going forward. Second, I would like to also thank the OECD CRIT Center on population dynamics. I think it started on the right foot. This is an important conference, but I think it will contribute significantly to the debate. Finally, I would like to thank the government of Greece and the Bank of Greece for all the support. If you look at the motto of the OECD, it says, better policies for better lives. Well, I'm going to talk about better policies for longer lives. Well, I'm going to talk about some of the macro impacts that we think that are important for us to take a look, and in particular, what type of policies that are needed for us to have healthier and longer lives. And then Matthias and our colleagues with Phyllis and Thomas and others will also present more evidence. But remember, as Andrew said very nicely, most of our systems, education systems, innovation systems, health systems, pension systems, they all started basically after the Second World War, almost around that time. And it was a world, and we used to live until 65. We would work until 50-something, 60. We would have a few brief, on average, years of retirement, and they would die. And it worked for this for a long time, at least in the 20th century. But right now, as the evidence has shown, and as I think Andrew has shown also very persuasively, we are having societies in which we expect to live to 80, 90, 100 years old. The fastest growing age group in Japan and other countries is 100 years old plus. We used to celebrate when there was a 100-year-old, and right now it's formal. I think it's almost automatic. I think Andrew has a very nice example in his book that it says, well, the government of Japan used to give a prize for the centenaries, but now there are so many centenaries that they give up, and so they're not giving the prize. So what we need to do is really to redesign our systems to a society that is, we are all living much longer. I'm pleased to say that the OECD is devoting a significant amount of resources to this, and looking at this better policy for longer lives and longevity society will be the purpose of a major new flagship that we hope to publish next year, to talk exactly about what type of policies, how can we redesign education systems, redesign health systems, and so on in this type of new society. And so this is going to be a very important issue going forward. Going back to what I would like to highlight, I would like to highlight just a few things. So first of all, we're just saying, well, we're living longer lives and healthy lives. Well, this is an estimation that we have for different countries. In the last 20 years before COVID, how much, just to give you a perspective, how much we gained in terms of life expectancy. Look at Korea. Korea gained close to 8 years of extra lives in over 2 decades, even though you can see that there's at least 5 years with healthy lives, but 3 with not so healthy lives. You can see in virtually all the countries, we're getting systematically more and more life expectancy and healthy lives too. So I think this is quite important going forward. And so we are definitely living longer and also healthier lives, but how can we prepare our societies for that? The second fact is that people are remaining also active longer. So this graph is telling you what is happening in terms of the 65 plus, and you can see that both males and females older than 65 now are staying in the labor market for much longer. And this is obviously one of the big aspects going forward, because if people are staying active longer, this will have major implications for the labor market. Also important to say is that longevity gains, as we just heard from John, longevity gains have very different outcomes according to your income and according to your education. Here you can see the graph shows the adults rating their health as poor, and whether you are very poor or you belong to the lowest quintile or the highest quintile, and you can see that there's a significant, the share of adults with poor health is consistently larger among people with low incomes and low education attainment, as you can see in the following graph. So if you have lower education, if you're poorer, you tend to have not so healthier lives compared to others. Partly is the nature of your jobs, but also because of health systems and the way that as Andrew was mentioning and John too, the way that your choices. Having said that, when we think about aging, very often we think it in a very negative way. And we think it in a negative way partly because of what this graph is showing. It's basically, we look at aging as negative, partly not because we're living longer, but as a society, this will have a significant impact on fiscal costs, on healthcare, on pensions, and so on. This is a debt sustainability analysis for the average OECD country, government debt. And we say, well, quite often for every single country, say, what is happening to our debt with aging costs and without aging costs? Of course, we are aging, so we should assume only the aging costs, but quite often, even our own desks at the OECD have the tendency to say, well, if you don't have aging costs, you're much better off, and so this is what you can do. But what we can say is that debt ratios, if nothing happens, will increase quite dramatically going forward. Another aspect that we think is important, a paper that we produced last year, shows that population aging will also depress GDP per capita unless it's offset by increased labor force participation. So that is, we need to convince people to stay longer in the labor force, and because of productivity growth. And so basically, you can see that the graph is showing how much population aging would depress GDP per capita between 2021 and 2050. And if age and gender-specific employment rates remain fixed and productivity doesn't grow, population aging will reduce GDP per capita on average OECD countries by 7%. In countries like Spain, is much more dramatic. You can see that if nothing happens, Spain will have a decline in GDP per capita by 20%. Of course, they are doing stuff already, but we're saying if policy doesn't change, what could be the impact? So again, it's another idea that aging necessarily perhaps is or potentially has negative impacts. But we say this, but we, as you'll see later on in the presentation, we think there is a lot of prospects to make sure that this doesn't happen. One of the areas that I think it's important to say that aging might have an important contribution is that aging, in fact, might speed up the adoption of technology. This is a graph that tells you what are the countries that are aging have aged between 1990 and 2025 from a paper from Semaglu and Restrepo. And has been an increase in industrial robots. And you look at industrial robots in terms of countries, the countries that are introducing more industrial robots are Japan, they are Singapore, they're Korea. So countries that are aging fairly fast, especially Japan. If you go to Japan, you cannot, they're producing a lot of robots and a lot of health-related type of robots besides the industrial robots. So it's very possible that aging might speed up the adoption of technology. On the other hand, there's a big question. So I'm giving you mostly questions, not answers, okay? But there's a big question, what will happen to business dynamism and innovation? If aging is so bad, does it mean that we're going to have less and less innovation? Are we going to have less business dynamism? So work that we are doing now, and in a few months' time we'll provide you the results, so we don't know yet. We look at business dynamism, firm dynamism across the OECD countries. This is just looking at the United States. We've seen that, as you can see in the dotted line, the trend of business startups have come down quite significantly, even though you see a bump in the past 2 or 3 years. This is related to what is happening right now in the United States. With COVID, there was a very strong reallocation of labor. 22 million people lost jobs. They went back to firms, created their own firms, and went back to larger firms. This had a positive impact on productivity. But on the other hand, we also saw a big increase in business dynamism in the United States. Whether this is going to be sustained or not, we'll see. But this is quite important. And as I said, in 6 months' time to 8 months' time, we'll provide the results of how we see across the OECD in terms of business dynamism. Is really aging having a negative impact on business dynamism or not? We presume that is not. We think it's mostly to do with population growth. It's not to do with aging, but we'll come back with results very soon. And finally, another area that I would like to say that is quite important, and we're working more and more on the impacts of productivity from AI. This is a graph that shows estimations of AI by different studies. Ours is on the right-hand side. And we think, and we estimated not only for the United States here, but also for the G7, and we presented just a couple weeks ago on this one for the G7, what's the productivity impact of AI? What we see, we look at in every single sector, where the sector is used in terms of labor force, the exposure of the sector, the adoption of AI in the different sectors. And we come to the conclusion that, in fact, AI is going to be at least as important for productivity growth as the ICT boom was. And we are not even considering the possibility of having artificial general intelligence. So we're talking about AI, even in the next 10 years, will have a very large increase in productivity. Associated with robotics, the impact is going to be even greater. And going back to what we were saying before, if you think that aging society is potentially because we need more labor-saving innovations, we might speed up the rate of innovation, potentially on aging-saving innovations. It's very possible that if you combine AI with aging, this might have a positive combination. We're talking a lot about AI. We're not forgetting another technology that has been developed right now that is quite important, which is quantum computing. The links between quantum computing and AI will have massive, and John was just mentioning this, massive repercussions for health developments and health discoveries. So very likely this will have, again, another positive impact on productivity and growth. So finally, what type of policies do we think governments can do to try to harness this longevity dividends? And Matthias will talk in the next half an hour, and he'll present a lot more evidence. I just wanted to place a few questions here. But, first of all, as we just shared, promoting healthy aging to enable longer working lives is quite important. Also, many countries are obviously linking retirement age to life expectancy, but we need to find ways of bringing more to have longer and healthier lives, working lives, but also providing some sort of incentives for countries to foster innovation. In particular, for example, why can't countries introduce fiscal incentives to hire older workers or to foster innovation for age-related innovations and productivity? Foster age-friendly working conditions is going to be very, very important in the agenda, and ensuring skilling and reskilling is going to be absolutely key. We're going to hear now the Minister of Labor from Greece that I'm sure will add a few issues on this. But what I'm going to tell you is, just would like to wrap up with something. Even though aging very often is portrayed by our ministries of finance and social security systems as a threat, as a cost, we see that the cost only exists if we do not address some of the issues that need to be addressed. How can we promote healthy lives? How can we make sure that people, rather than having, as we heard before, having a 3-life cycle with education, work, retirement, people, if you have longer lives, they're able to stay longer in the labor market, or they may be on and off outside the labor market? How can we prepare our labor markets for that? How can we prepare our education system if you get to 50 or 60, you're fed up with your profession, say, okay, listen, I'm going to change my life. And if you live until 100, you have enough time to change your life. You have enough time to go back to school, to do vocational training, to do whatever, recycle yourself, and be able to do that. So what should countries do right now to prepare ourselves to the great opportunity, not the cost, of course you have to take into account the cost, but the great opportunity that the silver economy or the longevity society will bring? That's why it's so important, this research network, and this is so important for us to continue to do work on this, so that we give good advice to countries and to governments on how to promote better policies for longer lives. Thank you.